Until the Second World War, I think that, or even afterwards, there was traditional agriculture was very closed loop. I mean, there were communities up in Brinscoll Moor where there was 40 different farms above, Burnley, which were completely self-sufficient. Yeah. I think the idea of the stuff being brought in off the farm, agrochemicals, fertilisers, and then everything carted off the farm, it becoming more linear, more of a production model, like a factory model. That's kind of crept in over time, and now that's the standard way of farming.
So what is he doing?
He's just farrowing the lands because it's coming up to the season now where you start planting your grass because the field's not been great. So it's just tilling the land so you can start growing crops and start getting more grass for the animals.
So what does he do? Just tear up the land basically?
So it's generally just, so you open up the land, so you literally just grazing over the top of it so you produce some loose soil. So what you do is then you're able to sow your seeds in afterwards and then it's going to grow.
As you see it, what are the problems with agriculture at the minute?
And the major problem that it's destroying the life support systems of the planet, and in particular around destroying soils. The soil gets destroyed by, firstly by cultivation, which has been going on for between 6,000 and 10,000 years. And sort of all part of the permaculture approach is to do as little disturbance to the soil as possible.
All in all, probably over a few years you probably will damage the soil. So what you do is you till the land for 4 years and then for the 5th year you let it rest.
So you actually let it rest for a year? Does that actually do anything? Do you like put muck in it and stuff, or?
Well, you generally just leave the field for a year. So because if you can probably notice there's quite a lot of mud and so you're generally ruining the land. So as you can see there where the buckets are up and down, that's where the animals congregate. So to let that recover really, you leave it for a year and it just leaves your fields looking nice, and then the year after that your season of hot crops is going to be much better.
The upside of that system is that a single farmer can, in calorific terms, can feed in the US 200 people. It's the highest ratio at any point in history. That in the past we needed, I don't know, upwards 50, 60, 70% of the population just working to create food to feed the whole population.
The whole soil, biology, chemistry, environment, it's a whole ecosystem, but the conditions are changing rapidly underground as oxygen gets used up, as moisture fills the pores up. Soil structure is very important, and so the kind of both cultivation and the application of fertilisers is destroying soil substance. And another thing that can happen if you're not careful is that if you overstock the livestock, the soil gets compacted, which again is damaged. Well, going back to plough agriculture, if you do that and the wind comes up, your soil structure begins to disappear, so when the wind comes up, then the soil blows away. This is one of the precursors of desertification.
There are purist models on either side, there are extremes on either side. I suppose when you think of extreme conventional agriculture that's completely unsustainable, you might look at the Midwest of America with massive combine harvesters, that are being driven almost like robotically across vast plains which are built on aquifers which are not being replenished. So you might look at the extremes of Monsanto crops, fertilisers, and then you might go, okay, well you've got an Austrian up a hillside who's almost doing everything by hand, and both those are really they are the extremes. I think there's a place that clusters around the achievable, which is a mix, and there's nothing essentially wrong with using mechanisation. There's nothing essentially wrong with resisting mechanisation. It's appropriate to the land you've got and the use you want from it, and also the community and the values you want to create.
Are we dependent on oil?
Totally. I quite like some of this work that's been done recently that's compared our attitude towards fossil fuels as some kind of addiction. Because we are realising that there are ways that we can, well, minimise our use of the actually quite a precious resource.
Post-war onwards then, we just had a massive increase in the amount of oil available, and that meant that mechanisation was a lot more possible.
Yeah.
And also the cost of agrochemicals went down, cost of fertilisers went down too, and they were pushed. They were aggressively pushed by the government agricultural policy.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, during the Second World War, up until then, like I said, that there'd be the traditional farm might have a mixture, especially in the north of England, had a mixture of animals and some arable crops, some roots, just a really good mix of food. And the waste from the animals would go into the field, which they used to grow the crops, and even saying Chat Moss out towards Salford and all the mosses around Manchester, the night soil, the waste was dumped on the fields and then that'd grow, and the food would be transported back into the city. So it was fairly what you call a circular model.
Yeah.
That got broken by the idea of just being able to spray fertility onto the fields, grow crops, and that's the main difference between permaculture and agriculture.
My main concern is the way that people have been desensitised to and divorced from not just growing food but preparing food is the big challenge now, because a lot of people don't know how to cook. So it's no use giving them fresh food, they don't know what to do with it.
It's the way mechanisation and subsidies have skewed the food market, because you end up growing things which can be grown and harvested easily. And on the whole, that's cereal crops, which in nature are extremely rare and difficult to harvest and difficult to process, but hey, they keep in a granary, so historically going back 5,000-10,000 years, they're the crop of choice, aren't they?
Permaculture is the practice of sustainable agriculture, focusing on design mimicking nature, biodiverse ecology, and low-energy solutions. Could you summarise what permaculture is?
Yes, it's about helping people make a better future for themselves. And with permaculture design, we're actually inhabiting the edge in between theory and practice. But the approach is really on the permaculture systems to build soil, and that's almost impossible to do if we're turning it over.
If you consider permaculture as the farthest point of sustainable agriculture and food, it can be incredibly productive. You can get layer crops and have a 3D use of space as opposed to just flat fields. The crops you grow can be highly nutritious. And you can also grow a different type of. You can move away from, if you like, fast growth, yearly crops which are high weight, sappy, if you like, towards ones which are slow maturing and have much higher nutritional value, much higher, denser sources of calories, which I think the people are moving towards. But the problem, the perception of permaculture is it is, I suppose, utopian, idealistic, and otherworldly, whereas it's actually an eminently sensible way of managing land. And in terms of the volume of fruit and what it could sell at that for, I estimated could make up to £20,000 a year per acre.
Per acre?
Yeah, because it's growing a high value crop, and that's really low maintenance as well. They said they only do 1 or 2 hours a day during the summer. So and there's Martin Crawford and there's many other people saying that this is the most productive way of farming and growing. However, it's also the most labour intensive.
Relatively low maintenance, but more important for me, the maintenance, such as it is quality activity. It's not backbreaking work, which is what you get stuck with in agriculture.
Three benefits of permaculture are increased nutritional value of the food, a community or a more group style of working which builds community, and potentially it's a way of increasing the fertility of the land rather than debasing it, so it passes on through the land to future generations.
And I'm reminded of that thing that Joanna Macy captured about this sort of story about the Shambhala prophecy, that at the time of great need the Shambhala warriors will emerge, but we don't know who they are because they wear no uniforms.